Hey friends, welcome back for another Heffy Doodle video. We are going to be making a slider pop-up Valentine. And let's talk about what we're using for that. We have this absolutely adorable Quill You Be Mine stamp set. It has those super cute little hedgehogs. We have the matching dies to go with it. I just love these little hedgehogs. We're also going to be using the slider pop-up die itself. Love this die. It's one of my favorites, especially if you're new to interactive. It's so great. Then we have the Fancy Nancy frames and dies, and we're going to be using this middle one. And then we also have the Stitched Hearts dies, another great die set. We also have the Scribble on My Heart stencil. Love this stencil. It's so different than anything else that I have. And then we have some alcohol marker friendly cardstock. So let's get started with our background first. I went ahead and used some raspberry cardstock and cut out the slider pop-up using it, and I taped in place the little pull because I didn't want that to move. I'm going to pull out our Scribble on My Heart stencil, and we're going to stick that right on top of our piece. I decided to do this after I die cut it because I'm using Distress Oxide ink, and this is a Distress Oxide spray called Tattered Rose. And now keep in mind this cardstock is not like, great for water, so don't go crazy spraying watery stuff all over it. But for some Distress Oxide, it'll work great. And I love how the Distress Oxide sprays look on your darker cardstocks. So I'm just going to heat set this, make sure it's good and dry before we move on to our next bit. And Miles is going to be a part of quality control, even trying to get his paw in the sprayed box. If it's messy, that cat's got to have his paws in it. All right, I'll clean off my stencil, super easy to do, just using a little bit of water and a microfiber cloth, or you could take it to the sink if that's what you need to do as well. And then we'll be ready to move on to our next step, which would be some stamping. So I pulled out that alcohol marker friendly cardstock, and I've got my little hedgehog that we're going to use. We don't have a lot of stamping that we're doing, just one little image. We're going to stamp him down on there using some blackout ink, and we'll get started with our coloring. I'll start with some E00 for his little skin. We're going to put a wash of that down. And then I'm going to come in with some E11 for a darker tone. And then I decide I want to bring in an undertone for this, just to make it even seem that much more realistic. Even though he's a cute little critter, we've brought in some BV02. It'll just add a little bit of an undertone. And then I'll work backwards from there with the E11. And the E00 and just blend that out a little bit more. Now for his quills, we'll start with some W3. We'll put that wash down all over his quills. And then I'm going to bring in some C3 so that we have some cool undertones with that. And I'll add that just where I think the shadowing would go. And then a little bit of W5. And then once again, we'll work backwards with our C3 and our W3. Then we need to color our heart. So I've brought in 3 colors for this heart. Our first color is some RV55. We'll just put a wash of that down. Then we'll come in with some RV25 and then some RV09. And then once again, I'll work backwards. I like doing it that way. I like lightest to darkest. But then once I get that all blended out, I am going to come in with that RV09 just to add a little bit more contrast. And then he'll be ready to cut out with our matching die. So I'll tack that down with a little bit of washi or mint tape, run that through my ever-loved Heffy Doodle mini die cutting machine. This thing never leaves my desk. And then he'll be all die cut and ready to go. Love him. So cute. So I cut out, using our Fancy Nancy frames, this piece out of some cotton candy cardstock, and then one of our little stitched hearts out of some white cardstock. And before I attach that down, we're going to cut out this piece using the other die in our slider pop-up die. So it doesn't cut all the way through at the top. That's just, that way your die is a little bit less expensive for you. So you just pop that into your die cutting machine, or not die cutting machine, but your like guillotine trimmer or your paper trimmer, and just cut that piece down. I'm going to attach that straighter edge to the bottom part, and you'll see what I'm talking about. But before we do that, I'm going to pull in the Interactively Yours stamp set. I want to make sure the recipient knows what to do with this card, so I'm going to stamp Pull Me with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink on our tab that is, remember, taped in place. So that is not there permanently, it's just stuck there with tape. And I did bring in a little arrow as well. And I'll remove that with its tape, and then we're going to start reinforcing those score lines that our die put into place. So that first one goes backwards, then forwards, and then backwards. That's going to give us our mechanism. Now you'll see that one area there, it's like about a little more than 1/4 of an inch. I'm bringing in some 1/4 inch tape to put down there. You want that to be a nice strong adhesive, whatever you use, because that's going to attach to that white piece of cardstock that we have sitting there. That's our puller, that's our mechanism. So I'll peel off that release paper, and I'm going to line up the flat edge because I want that rounded edge to be the piece that you see that comes out of the top. And that is how our mechanism will work. And then this piece will just go back in place there. Before we do that, I'm going to make my channels. I like to have slider channels so that way the slider itself has plenty of room to move. And for me, I mean, you could use foam tape, but I like to use 1/4 inch pieces of cardstock. So I'll cut 3 each for each side. So basically I need 9 pieces of 1/4 inch cardstock. And then I'll use my tape, and I'll tape 3 of those together. You could use liquid glue, just make sure that you're using a very thin line of that adhesive. But you'll see here I'm just adding that to my strips of paper, peel off that release paper, and then I'll line those on top of each other. Sorry, I'm kind of off screen here. Kind of get into card making mode sometimes and don't pay attention. Put that final one on top, and then I'll peel off that release paper, and we'll stick that down at the bottom and trim off that excess. And then we'll do the same thing with the other 6. So you do 3 more together for this one. And again, you could save yourself a little time and just use foam tape, but I wanted to make sure that it had plenty of room to move, but not too much room. All right, here's where I am going to bring in a very, very thin line of liquid glue. You could use your tape if you wanted to, but I decided to pull out the liquid glue just to let you know it does work. And then I'll take my backing, which is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2 inches of white cardstock, and I'll just stick that down to the back. And there's your card. I mean, that's that. And then when you remove the slider, you've got plenty of room to write to your recipient. Put a little bit of glue on our little tab, stick that down and in place. And now I can start attaching the outside stuff to our card. I'm going to attach my heart down first to my Fancy Nancy frame. And then I have found the easiest way to attach things to the front, because you don't want to glue things closed, is to open up the slider. But we'll do that here in a second. I'm going to stamp my sentiment first, and I'm doing that on some Pearblossom pressed sentiment stock, covering that with some white embossing powder, and then heat setting that till that is smooth and melted. And then we can trim down our sentiment using our guillotine trimmer. And then I decide to kind of cut a flag banner on each of those ends. So cut into the middle and then go from each corner into that middle that you cut into. Just an easy way to do that. And then now we'll be ready to attach our pieces to the outside of our card. But like I said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open it up, because the last thing I want to do is glue it down and close it. Have it be glued closed. So we attach that to that bottom portion that's open, and I'm just using liquid glue. And we do the same thing with our sentiment right below our little hedgehog. So everything will move freely. And then I'm going to stamp one more sentiment on the inside that says, "You hog my heart." And you could add more to it, but this is going to do it for me. I love how this turned out. I hope you do too. If you like this video, be sure to hit that like button and definitely consider subscribing if you haven't already done so. Big thanks for all the support that you all give me. I really do appreciate it. Thanks for stopping by, and I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye, everybody.